Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Expand the Business. My name is Casey Eberhart, and I am thrilled to be your host for this amazing, awesome show where we highlight entrepreneurs that have leveled up, skilled up, and are here to share their experience to help you move your business forward. And I got to tell you, I am sitting here beaming from ear to ear simply because of today's interview. I have to say, you know how every once in a while you're around business people and entrepreneurs and you can't help but smile? Well, today today I have I don't even know what to call her other than the queen of sparkle, the queen of smile, the queen of positive energy. Today we bring you Helen Brahms. Helen Brahms is a genealogist, and she is currently on what is arguably the coolest real life adventure as she travels North America in her new RV and named Sparkles. And we're going to have an entire conversation about this and how traveling around has been an amazing adventure as an entrepreneur. So without further ado, let me bring out and introduce you to one of my friends. She's absolutely awesome. So Helen Brahms, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Casey. It is so awesome to be here. I can't wait. This is going to be fun.
We were just talking off air, and I was like, just be yourself. And she's like, oh, well, we're just going to talk like we normally talk. And I was like, well, hang on a second. Let's make sure that we remember that there's actually a camera and sound rolling and all of that, because we can just get so into the weeds because we have such a blast and you have such positive energy. So Helen, let's start back in the Wayback Machine.
Okay.
And take me through. I know you're from New Zealand. You guys will hear that in her accent. She does have a funny accent. But I want to hear kind of like what makes you tick, right? And just give me a little bit of background about you and what brought you here and what sort of has us in the role we're playing right now.
Wow, this is going to be awesome. So what brought me here is I actually met my late husband online back in 1996 in a chat room. So that was just as the internet was brand new. We are like the online dating pioneers, I guess you could call us. I came over to the States for 2 weeks. I ended up staying 7 weeks, went back to New Zealand, packed up and moved over here in February of 97 and been here ever since. And we got married in December of 98. And unfortunately, he left us in September of 2017 after a long, well-fought battle with cancer.
Yeah. And, Brad was just such an instrumental guy in molding who you are, and quite frankly, molding who I am. I had the unbelievable good fortune and privilege and honor to know Brad and work with Brad. And he was just a stellar guy. I as a side note, not to get all sappy and teary eyed, but I know right now he is looking at us laughing, going, okay, you two, it's showtime, right?
Now he'd be sitting there going, aha.
He was a tremendous guy. And I know he had a huge impact on you moving your business and your entrepreneurial career forward. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how important is it to have a spouse or a loved one kind of help supporting that journey?
I think it's hugely important because if you don't have that support, then you can end up having a lot of battles with each other. And we actually started, I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset anyway. And I was working for Marriott at the time when he was diagnosed with cancer back in 2008. And in August of that year, we were in the middle of what we call the 4 months of hell. He had got a temporary ileostomy put in at the end of May. We got rid of it in September, and that 4 months in between was one of the toughest, most stressful times of our lives at that point. We grew closer together as a couple, but we came up with the thing that, we both decided that we need to do something extra to get more money coming in at home because he wasn't working at the time. So I was looking through the Entrepreneur magazine, and they had their top 100 franchises in there. And so we're flipping through it, and we've got the vending machines and the car washers and the laundromats and all of that sort of, and the candy machines and all that. And I'm like, no. And I turn to the page and go, what about travel? And he goes to me, says, and his parents had a brick and mortar travel agency for years, and they just closed it. His mother had closed it like about 6-7 years beforehand. And he says, you can't do that from home. he says, he says, no, we can't do that one. You can't do it from home. I said, well, there's a whole entire section here on home-based travel, and this outfit called Cruise Planners is #1, and it has been for the last 6 years. And he's like, huh. So that's when we started investigating, and he also has a love for travel as well. And we kind of worked very well together in that, but we did end up buying the franchise during our 4 months of hell, when you should not do anything life-changing, as they always advise you, but we did it anyway. And, here we are.
Both of you were kind of rebel rousers.
Yes, him in a very quiet way, me a little louder. Which is where we worked very well together, because he was that quiet, steady support for me, whereas I always told him he was my buoy, and he always complained he was my anchor. I said, no, you keep me grounded, but give me enough room to let me spread my wings and fly and be the best that I can be. He brought out the best in me. I think because of his quiet, supporting nature, because he was an introvert, but he was a wallflower introvert. I'm an outgoing introvert. So he was that steady support for me, and I would go flop down in the living room on the couch and go, I've had an idea, and he would literally roll his eyes and go, oh crap, here we go again.
Yeah.
But we had that good synergy together. We just fitted so well together, and we balanced each other out very well. And to have that support when you're in an entrepreneurial mind and you're trying ideas that are like, is this really going to work? And he's just like, go try it, see what happened. And he would give his very reasonable logic, because he was a software engineer. Not a software engineer, he was a software architect. So he's designed the computer programs. And so he was that very logical thinker, and he wanted everything listed out and all of that, whereas I like to mind map, and it's all over the page. Trying to get into mind map one time was an experience, because he was so like, you can't put that there because it's related to this over here. I said, it's the way it flows. Go with the flow.
To do the mind map, because it includes lots of pretty colors that you get to draw all over the place.
I have my 24 different Sharpie colored markers. I have my roll of paper, and I just go to town. I have a blast with it. But to him, it was a jumbled mess. He wanted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He wanted it listed out. I just wanted the mess, because I could organize the mess. His way was just, it's too much.
Yeah.
Grocery lists I can handle, to-do lists I can handle. When it comes to ideas, it's a mess.
Gotcha. So we started the travel business. We're doing travel business, and I know that you became a fantastic travel professional. I've actually worked with you to do some group cruises for me and produce those cruises, and I know you've done a ton in the travel business. And I know that obviously things kind of change and mold, and we've got to do some pivots in our entrepreneurial journey. Mm-hmm. And you are no exception. I think there are lots of entrepreneurs that it's an evolutionary process, and it's a journey, a process of self-discovery and trying new things and pivoting and looking around you and changing up. So when we lost Brad, when Brad transitioned, I know that started another journey, another chapter in the journey. Well, let's call it another chapter, but you bring in all of those other chapters with you on this journey. Talk to me a little bit about what that's like. I mean, I imagine, and I can only imagine when you lose a spouse, that there's a lot of grief, obviously, and feelings and looking and like going, oh crap, now what?
Exactly. Brad transitioned in September of 2017. 18 days before he passed, we'd actually lost our dog of 12 and a half years. And that was a big change. And it was sometime during, because Brad was in hospital at the time, and in a very long 87-day stay that he was there for. He came home for 5 days and transitioned at the end of that 5 days. But losing Gus was the start of the whole process, because it was one of the drives home, and always on my drive to the hospital or home from the hospital, I was doing an audio recording, and it was almost like a voice journal every day, because I couldn't sit and write notes, but I could talk on my 10 to 30-minute drive home, depending on the traffic. And so I would voice all of these. And I remember one day I was sitting there in traffic, and I had the Pacific Ocean out on my left, and I'm stuck in traffic. I could see the 5 over on the right-hand side there, all bumper to bumper traffic, and sort of thinking, well, this, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, to which I went home. And all of a sudden some feeling came over me that I was going to lose Brad that month. And that the reason I'd gone through what I had gone through with Gus was to prepare me for Brad's departure. And I just started whacking the hell out of that steering wheel and swearing up a blue storm. And going, absolutely not, no way. And I basically call it my drop down, drag it out conversation with God, that I was not going to lose Brad in the same month. I was not going to lose him in the same year. I wasn't ready to do that. Maybe in a year's time I'd be ready. But God has his own timing on everything else, and it's not the same timing as mine. And Brad transitioned about 2 to 3 weeks later. So that was the beginning of that journey, the fact that I'd been through the passing with Gus to then the passing with Brad, and the rest of that year was a very much of a fog. But I remember on the 28th of December of 2017, I was sitting at Brad's graveside, because that was our anniversary. It was our 19th wedding anniversary that day, or would have been. And I'm sitting there, and I remember getting up from the graveside there and walking to the car. And as I was walking to the car, I could literally picture a door that had 2018 written on it. And there was this bright sunshine on the other side of that door. The fog that I'd been held in for the last 3 months was starting to lift. And I honestly could not wait for January 1st to come around, where I could step through into 2018 and close 2017 behind me. The months that followed, there was a lot of change, a lot of transition. If anybody tells you that grief time makes things better with grief, that's bullshit. I'm sorry. The process I've been through, grief will hit you at any moment, at any time along this journey. It could be a word somebody says. It could be an action somebody does. It could be a song that you hear. It could be something that you see. It could be, you even see, I saw this tall, blonde guy the other day, and I could have sworn it was Brad from behind, because he was about the same height and build as Brad. And then he turned around and it was a completely different face, but it put me straight back into that grief process again. So grief will hit you at any moment and any time. And I remember the biggest awakening I had on this whole process was in May of 2018. We had planned to do the Panama Canal cruise. And I decided in January I decided I didn't want to do that cruise, because I was going to countries I didn't know on my very first cruise by myself, 14 days. And I thought, I don't think I'm ready to handle that by myself. So I then turned around and changed it for a cruise to Alaska, which was the very first cruise Brad and I had done together. And I was on the Celebrity Solstice, and I'm standing there at the safety drill. We hadn't even started. And I'm looking around this room, and there's all these people standing there in couples. And I'm standing there with however many hundreds of people were in our little muster station area. And I'm the only person standing there by myself. And suddenly I had this huge wave, literally almost wiped me out, of grief come over me. And it's sudden realization that this is now my life. When I travel, I'm going to be traveling by myself. I no longer have that companion, that fun person that I can banter with, that we can explore together with. I'm going to be doing this by myself. And all I wanted to do was become a pile of gooey mess on the floor there in the middle of the room that we were in. But I had to hold myself together, because all this room was full of strangers. And I managed to get back, and that was the longest 40 minutes of my life, getting through that muster drill, getting in the elevator, getting back to my cabin. And the second I closed that door, I just collapsed in a pile of goo and just let everything go. But that was a big defining moment for me. And then it was, then after that, after a good cleansing cry, it was pick myself up, dust myself off, pull my big girl panties on, and get out there and enjoy myself, because I knew that Brad would want me to enjoy this cruise. It was my first cruise without him. It was closing that cruising loop that we had done together, our travel loop together. And this was me keeping my promise of moving forward, even if it was half a shuffle step forward. As long as it's forward momentum, we've kept it going.
Well, and I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, that's such a good little, it's actually not even a metaphor. It's just real life. And that what I heard you say was that there was a nanosecond, a transformational moment in which you realized, this is what my life is going to be from this point forward. And what's really interesting, and I know we haven't even really talked about this kind of in this context, but when we lose somebody that's close to us, one of the fears that we have is that we're going to be forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, I remember having a conversation with both my grandfathers before they transitioned. And that was one of their concerns, is that I don't want to be forgotten. And I made the commitment to them, like, I'll do everything in my power to keep your memory alive, and for all the world to get to know these incredible people.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that moment, I know that you have had a fascination and a love and really kind of this heartfelt need to be a genealogist and do research. And I've always known you to be somebody that's like digging around in family trees and on all these things. And it's like, okay, let's get back to travel. Let's get back to travel. And you're like, yeah, but over here, I'm doing this on this person. I'm helping this person. I'm like, yeah, let's jump back into travel. Help me with travel. And you're like, yeah, but I want to, and it's an evolution. But when we lose somebody close to us,
Mm-hmm.
that point becomes the beginning of history. And so talk to me a little bit about, like, why is genealogy even important? I mean, I've wrestled with this as a business owner and entrepreneur. I have said oftentimes, and you've heard me talk about this probably ad nauseum, and that is that, on our headstone, it's our date we were born, our date we transitioned, and everything else is in a teeny tiny half-inch dash.
Yep.
And one of the things I promised my grandfathers, both of them, was that I would try to live my life making that dash as thick and as full as possible. But at the end of the day, every time I've been at a cemetery or celebrating somebody's life at a transition party, I guess I'll call it, I always walk around and I always just wonder what all of those other folks' dashes really were like. And so when we talk about genealogy and the history and the ancestry of family trees and all of that, talk to me a little bit about why that's even important. I mean, I just imagine what people's dashes are, but I don't know who they're married to. I don't know who they dated. I don't know who their kids are or any of that. Talk to me, just why is genealogy remotely important?
Well, for a start, genealogy, first of all, I absolutely love walking cemeteries. I love reading the headstones and thinking about people's lives as well. And when you find similar names in a cemetery, you're sort of like, oh, I wonder if they're related. It's the genealogist in me, can't help it. But I love one of the reasons that genealogy is important is it forges a connection with the past. And people go, well, I don't want to worry about the past. But yet when it becomes a bonding time with the family, because when you start digging into the family's past, you can see some traits are actually passed down through generations. Like, for example, if you go back through my generation, through my father's side of the family, there's a lot of duty and service in there. My great-great-grandfather fought in World War I. My great-grandfather fought in World War II. World War I and World War II. And my grandfather fought in World War II. My grandmother, my dad's mother, was also in World War II. She was a Women's Auxiliary Air Force. And that was before they merged with the Royal New Zealand Air Force. My dad was a fireman and then a policeman. And my mum was a nurse. So they've had this sense of duty and service all the way through my family. And I can trace it back. And it's sort of like, where does it come from? And sometimes there's stuff that happens in your family and you're sort of like, whoa, is this something that gets passed from generation to generation? Is it just me? But when you actually start looking at your family tree and you start researching the individuals in those trees and finding out their occupations and how they lived and where they came from, you start getting a sense of who they were and going, oh, and then you start seeing photographs from the past, which is always fun. In fact, the other day, my mum and I were looking at a picture that had in it her grandmother, her great-grandmother, and the kids. And so she's picking out, and she says, now, look at this picture of my great-grandmother. Who does that face remind you of? And I immediately said my cousin's name. And she looked at me and she goes, oh. She says, I would have said more your grandmother's name. I said, no. I said, yeah, it looks a little bit like Nana. I said, but it looks more like Catherine than it does Nana. And she looked at me and she went, actually, I think you're right. So even seeing it's just the physical stuff will get passed down through generations as well. So it's kind of interesting. And then another reason that it's important too is that death certificates. Death certificates are huge with genealogists because you can trace back medical history through a family. Is there a history of heart disease? Is there a history of cancer throughout the family? By looking at people's cause of death, we can turn around and see, do we have to worry about something that could be a DNA thing or is it just a one-off thing? So you're looking back through that family history as well to see what's the medical history in the family by looking at why people passed.
Yeah,
and that's a big one.
Yeah, this hits me. This hits me right at home, and I don't normally share this, and I don't even think I've shared this with you. But the health consequences of understanding the importance of genealogy in what you just said is vitally important, close to my own personal family, and that is my sister-in-law is part of a breast cancer research family tree kind of project because every woman in her family tree dating back to literally hundreds of years all has had the DNA to trigger breast cancer.
Yep.
And so what that's allowed them to do is really go in and test and catch all the women in her family early enough to be able to move forward on that. I never really thought of it that way, literally until you and I were just talking about that this had to be the work of a genealogist to go back so that we could go forward.
Exactly.
Right? And
sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, look, I'm like everybody else. I've seen, our family, we have a family safe somewhere, and I've seen birth certificates in there and death certificates in there. And I don't know who these people are. I have to be honest with you. I know they're just getting kind of put in a box and moved kind of from place to going. What the heck are we supposed to do with these things? And we don't even know what they are or who they're from. I mean, I can imagine when people are cleaning out loved ones' homes after they've transitioned or something happens, all of these come to light. Like, what do you do with them?
Oh my gosh, this is like a goldmine for a genealogist. These are jigsaw puzzle pieces. When you think about it, if you think of a family tree, it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together to establish who are you, where did you come from. But then when you get these birth certificates and death certificates and the marriage certificates and stuff, all of a sudden, this family story is laid out in front of you, and you're now putting the pieces together to see what order did the story happen in. So you're taking these pieces and these names, and you start researching them. How is this person? And if it's a name you don't know, how is this person related to me? You can also find out some very interesting things from these documents.
Now, Helen, let me just interrupt you here because this kind of dives into my next question, but I think we're kind of blending them, which is so awesome. It's like, how do we even start with any of this? Right? Like I just think about going it, like I'm just thinking in my own head, it's like, okay, I want to do some research. I don't even know where to start. Do you start with birth certificates and death certificates like this? Like what do you even do to start?
It's very easy to start with what you know. Who are you? When were you born? Where were you born? Who are your parents? When were they born? Where were they born? When and where were they born? Everything is always when and where, when and where, when and where. So when you're talking about, who are you? Who are your siblings? And you do all the when and wheres. And then you go back in next generation. Who are my parents? When and where? Then you go back to their parents. When and where? And so you start creating this list of information. You pull together everything you know. You start asking. You start with what you know. You also start interviewing the oldest generation that you have alive at that time. It may not be your grandparents. It could be a great aunt or uncle that might be alive because your grandparents may have passed. But it could be like a great aunt and uncle. Start getting the family stories out of them. Record them. Put them on video. Get them on voice recording. Take notes. Get everything transcribed afterwards, because then you can go through and pull out all the pieces. And this is where a lot of the family stories start coming out. You'll get some of the myths and legends for the family. And you're like, ooh, I wonder if that one's true. And this is where my little, my little detective sensor goes off. It's sort of like, ooh, a mystery. Ooh, I wonder what happens here. And
it's so funny you say that. One of the things that we did with my grandmother before she transitioned, she invited a bunch of people to the house, and when she was getting up there in age, she kind of gave everybody the ability to go put stickers on furniture, so when that happened, that there'd be no arguments. But all I did was ask her for some photographs and for her to sit down and tell me about the photographs. And so I literally sat at her kitchen table, and she had photographs, and I just turned on my phone recorder and started recording her telling me about each of the photographs. And then what I did, because these were all photographs, obviously, that were on paper, I mean, weren't digital photographs, I just stuck a Post-it note to the back saying where in the recording she was talking about this particular person, so on and so forth. And so look, I only did that. I have this is going to sound terrible. I don't have that big of an interest in my past. I certainly don't want to take the time to do all of that. So in that case, someone like me who maybe has some bits and pieces, but we want to fill that story, that's when we can reach out to someone like you. Absolutely. Or reach out to you. And by the way, you guys, let me just give a huge endorsement to Helen, because she's one of the best on the planet with this. That's when we would bring in a genealogist and say, hey, Helen, I've got these bits and pieces. Hey, can you help connect all the dots? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you've got that recording there, oh my gosh, that is gold. It's you always talked about I always remember you telling us the stories about your grandfather and how he taught you that entrepreneurial spirit from the start. But was he was an entrepreneur? Was his parents an entrepreneur? See, we can trace that back through their occupations and stuff and see, were they business owners or did they work for somebody else? Where did that entrepreneurial stuff start happening in your family tree? So now we can actually relate you to times in history, to points in history. Where did they live? Where did they grow up? What did they do? What were their occupations throughout their years of living and things? Were they a farmer? Were they always a farmer? Where did that come from? Were they a store owner? Were they always a store owner? We can start relating those things. And when you start putting that picture together, you start getting this rich history about yourself. But then the other cool part is that you can start relating it to points in history, because kids aren't taught history as much as we were taught history when we were at school. And so they're losing that connection with the past. But if you can turn around and say, hey, your great-grandfather, your three times great-grandfather, he fought in the Civil War for the Union. And this is where he was stationed. He might have been at the Battle of Manassas or at Gettysburg or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, that for me, it would pique my interest. So I say, oh my gosh, I had a three times great-grandfather at Gettysburg. Let me go find out more information about him. And now all of a sudden, you're learning the history of Gettysburg. And what went on at the thing. So now it's become more personal. So when you can connect to times in history through your family tree, your history now becomes more personal to you because of that personal connection.
That's awesome. So I want to ask you about one more thing, because our time is flying.
Oh, I hate it when it does that.
I know, right? So what I love is that this whole journey has allowed you to literally hop on board Sparkles, which is our RV.
Absolutely.
And we're traveling around, meeting people, connecting with people, digging in family trees. And I know you got a little bit of travel stuff going on the side as well, but talk to me just for a minute or so about the journey that you're on and why it's so impactful to you in terms of being an entrepreneur and a business owner as you travel the cool country.
Well, one of the goals that Brad and I always had together was to visit all 50 states. That was our goal, and visit all of the provinces in Canada as well. And that had always been our goal. And our goal was to buy an RV and do these separate road trips from time to time. But when I was looking, it was March 17th, 2018, because it was 2 days before St. Paddy's Day. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the house that we were renting at the time and knowing that my lease was going to be up in a year. And I'm looking around and going, oh my gosh, I've got to find somewhere to live. I have to figure this out. I don't want to go in an apartment. I've got to find a house. And it just started getting so overwhelming. And I suddenly said, screw it, I'm going to go live in an RV. And I sat up and I'm looking around going, who the hell said that? I had no, and I sat back and I went, that's not such a stupid idea. And that started the journey for looking for Sparkles. And I got Sparkles 14 months later. It happened to be May 4th, which is most people know is Star Wars Day. Star Wars was a big thing with Brad, but of course I didn't make that connection until months later, that he was putting his seal of approval on the purchase of Sparkles. But traveling around the country, it's great because you go through within the US, there are so many different cultures based on what state you're in, based on the people that you meet. And I love meeting people. Yes, I'm an introvert, but I'm an outgoing introvert. And I'm one of those that has to have my alone time to charge. But then if I'm alone too much, I get too much energy and I have to be around people to burn it off. So going from different campgrounds to different campgrounds, it is huge. It is great. You get to meet some amazing people. Along the way, I met Zeffie, who is my little traveling companion. She's a 32-pound mini German Shepherd, and she is she's just the joy of my life, and she is the best traveling companion I could ask for. She doesn't talk back to me, although at times it would be nice to have somebody to have a conversation with. But you get to meet other people at the dog parks that are at campgrounds and stuff, or other dog owners, and you get to meet them and have conversations with them. And meanwhile, your dogs are playing like kids at a playground. They're playing in the dog park. You're just keeping an eye on them. So you get to meet a lot of people. And for the entrepreneurial side of it, it's expanding your network. It's a great way to expand your network and meet people from different walks of life, to meet people from different states, different countries. It's real casual networking, and it's a lot of fun. You can learn a lot about people standing in a dog park watching while your dog's playing.
I love it. I love it. So Helen, let me ask you one final question before we close out the show. I ask everybody that we interview here on Expand the Business this same question. Is there anything that I've missed that you just have a burning desire that we need to just get out and get off our chest and to the audience?
It's something that we didn't have done in the questions, and something that just struck me when you asked me that question was just get out and do it. If you've got dreams, go follow them. Just take one step towards obtaining that dream. When Brad, there was a question, he had a palliative care counselor came in a few days before he came home from the hospital, and she said to him, when she asked that question, what are some of the things that you regret about not doing in life? And he had a lot of personal things that he shared, but one of the ones that has, and some of them are too personal to share, but one of the ones that stuck with me that I always pass on is his, and at the time we only had one grandchild, and his biggest regret was that he would never get to see his grandkids grow up. And that was his biggest regret. And my thing has always been, and he made me promise to him that I would always keep moving forward. I would always go after my dreams. And when I hit a stopping place or a stumbling block or something, and I feel like giving up, I go back to that conversation that we had. And I thought, I made him that promise. Because life is short. We don't know when our time is going to be up. So my thing is, do you want to live a fulfilled life or live a life full of regrets? The choice is ours. It's up to us. How full do we want our dash to be?
Yep. And on that, that's the mic drop moment of this entire episode. Helen, thank you so very much. I know that you're traveling around. You're on your true life adventure. I respect your journey, and I respect you so much. I love just being in your space. You're positive. You've got it going on. You've got the right mindset, and you're always moving forward. And look, here's the thing. You guys, if you've never worked with a genealogist, I just reach out to Helen, have a conversation with her. You will be enriched no matter what the outcome of the conversation is. So you guys, look, before we wrap out of here, I just want to say thank you so much, not only to Helen, but you, the audience as well. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the show. And if you are listening to this, please give us a review. These podcasts live and die based on our reviews. So we would love and appreciate a review. So with that, I hope that you are out living a life of no regrets. Give somebody an amazing day. Now let's go give somebody else an absolutely awesome day. We'll see you guys on the next show. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.